It says live run. Yeah? I'm also just going to check if there's anybody there. Yeah, it's connected on the other YouTube. Okay, welcome Cynthia.
Thank you.
And welcome everybody. We were just talking about how this feels like an intimate kind of a tuition hostel class. My name is Angarika and I work at Maraa, and I just thought that before we start, I would just like to briefly introduce this year's October Jam. So October Jam is Maraa's annual arts festival. Each year we organize it around a different idea or a theme, and usually it's quite a chaotic affair.
Okay.
It's like 31 days of different kinds of artists coming in, events in different parts of the city. It's kind of across genre, across form. Great fun, but also very busy. But as I was mentioning to Cynthia on our call, this year we kind of decided to take a little bit of a pause. And so the jam this year is called Repair. And it's a little bit of time for us as a collective to kind of regather and revisit some of our ideas and ways of working. And also a time to kind of invite other people in who might be interested in similar questions and similar kinds of deliberations. So it's mostly actually an internal jam this year, the festival. But on the weekends, we have film screenings and talks. And this is the second talk in a series of talks called Between the Lines. We called it Between the Lines because we thought it kind of hinted at revisiting certain ideas, concepts, finding different ways to read into history. So that's why the series is called Between the Lines. And last week we had Ram and Rekha in conversation, and the talk was called A Story of Identity. And we were exploring different kind of intellectual trajectories of how identities are constructed. And I think the talk was a good primer for the next series of talks. I think it was a good kind of set the tone for what we're going to be discussing today and also subsequently. So for whoever is with us online, I am very, very happy to welcome Cynthia. We can give her a round of applause. She's traveled a long way to be here. In a formal introduction, Cynthia is a women's rights activist with many, many years of experience, and she's also an independent policy researcher, but she's also worn many different hats over the years. So it's a little difficult to squeeze all of that into a two-line bio. But for those of us who live in Bangalore and have been involved in different kinds of activism, Cynthia is also a very familiar face. In fact, a couple of months ago, my colleague Ekta was moderating a discussion which was looking at inter-movement dialogues, and Cynthia was also a speaker on that. And some of what you said then is actually what also sort of sowed the seeds of why we wanted to have this talk today. So today's talk has a very heavy title. It's called A Silence Yet to be Broken. And the idea is to try and trace different trajectories within the women's movement. When I was talking to Cynthia about this talk, she was sharing with me a little bit about what her journey has been and what the ups and downs of working within the women's movement. And I guess we will also unpack what the women's movement means in the next hour or so. So to start off, I thought, Cynthia, it would be nice if you could kind of share with all of us what some of your turning points have been in your kind of experience over the last 20, 30 years. Maybe some moments that have kind of shifted ways of thinking for you, maybe angered you, maybe motivated you. Just a few turning points so everyone kind of has a sense of what your experience has been. And then we can dive deeper from there.
One of the things you didn't mention that I also am is that I'm an independent journalist. So in fact, that is what brought me into this field. As a communication specialist, when I came to Bangalore in the 80s, after my journalism after the postgraduate journalism training, I tried to get into the newspapers here, but somehow there didn't seem to be any interest at all. Like there was nobody who was who even interviewed me, or I mean, who called me for an interview. I applied to everybody. Then there was Indian Express, then there was Deccan Herald, the Hindu was there. The Times of India came a little later than that. So my time is quite a long time back. But then there used to be a magazine called the City Tab, very popular, very um, chatty, breezy, but also very local, very nice magazine. So I started writing regularly for them. But I was just getting into my stride when City Tab shut down. And C.K. Meena, who used to probably write most of the paper from end to end almost, she joined the Deccan Herald or something. Yeah. So that's partly the then after that I was hired by an NGO as a communications person because I speak many languages, and they wanted somebody on the field. I mean, someone who can communicate well as speak to the people on the ground. And because I spoke all these languages, it was a micro enterprise operation, the first one in India actually. Even before, I think the one after Bangladesh, the one that started there, Grameen Bank. After that, ours was the first micro enterprise one. So I was this communications person running around the town, talking to people. And I was also a communications project officer. So I was doing this. And subsequently, I joined another firm briefly. As a manager, they used to do training. I was also good at teaching English, to spoken English, to English as a second language. So this institution used to train people for TOEFL and GMAT and all that. So I was doing some training there briefly, about 6 to 8 months, and then after that I joined Search. As many of you will remember, Search as a very research-oriented, grassroots-oriented, training-oriented institution. I was part of an evaluation process that they were doing. That took me to Andhra Pradesh, into two districts, Chittoor and Anantapur. I grew up in Bellary district, just across the border from there. So the culture of that area was familiar to me. And I was able to do a good job. And at the end of, after I finished and submitted my part of the report, the observations were that she is very good at talking about the women's issues. So that was a time when, that was instinctive. I did not look to talk about women's issues. So then that was a time in the, when was 90, around 90 plus, 91, 92 level. That was gender was the big thing then. So gender training, gender sensitization, gender mainstreaming, gender analysis, gender budgeting. This was the buzzword. And people in NGOs and international level people, they knew about gender, but grassroots people didn't know about gender. It's not taught. It's not something you can teach so easily. Nowadays, you see gender studies departments. Then that was unheard of. There was no language also to talk about, and that when you're talking in Telugu and Kannada and Tamil, what are the words you use? So you had to find a new way of communicating. So it was difficult. So that's how I ended up traveling the length and breadth of Andhra Pradesh, because I spoke some amount of Telugu. Though the Telugu they speak, say in coastal Andhra, is very different from the way I speak Telugu. So I remember that when I finished that task over 2.5 years, I used to go every quarter or something. They said, the first time they said, Madam, we know, and they say in Telugu, we know you're speaking Telugu, but we don't understand your Telugu. Then at the time of giving me a farewell, they said, Madam, when she came, she was not able to, we could not understand the Telugu that she spoke. But now see how well she has picked up our Telugu, how well she speaks, and like that. So I'm also a quick learner. So that's how. So that gave me a lot of understanding and space. Eventually, that led to my being part of a team which coordinated the women's participation in the Beijing conference, Beijing, in 1995. So I was a communications specialist in the mobilization, NGO mobilization. We did travel all over the country, spoke about it. The first time, in fact, I was startled. So coordination unit Bangalore was having a meeting, and then we had only Doordarshan. Doordarshan came and the TV thing was set up. I was a communications person. I wasn't the head of the industry. There was another lady who was the coordinator, and she was supposed to speak to to the audience, and they were recording. And I told her, "It's up now. Come on, go ahead and speak." She said, "I can't do it." Then I just had to go up there and start speaking. Okay, and then after that, when I went home in the evening, my mom said, "I saw you on TV. They recorded it and uploaded it, and it was aired on national television." You see, so that was the kind of you sort of did stuff as it went along. So that's been a part of my journey. Like even today's journey was like that. The liquid is speak across the Osu Road to come and be here in time. I'm so sorry that you all had to wait, had a long wait, but there was something that had to be done today. No question. My son is going to rejoin his work. The lady who I had to meet was not available during weekdays. It had to happen on Sunday afternoon, and we were hoping to be back by 6, but it didn't happen like that. I'm so sorry. Anyway, so this kind of what to say, like roll up your sleeve and jump into it kind of stuff has been part of my style, working style, my lifestyle, and so that's how I went from being a journalist, writing. I continue to write, but I also went into NGOs and I went into training in a new field called gender, one of the pioneers, and also one of the pioneers which spoke that language. So the people who did training in gender are people from, they're NGO people and not that familiar, they're not from the grassroots. I was actually from the grassroots in the sense that I grew up, my father was a mining engineer. So I grew up in mining towns. Sandur was the place I really grew up. So everyone knows Sandur because of the scam that took place, the huge scam, which still that the money and the politics that was unleashed still reverberate in Karnataka. So I grew up there. So I've seen a lot of poverty. As a young girl, I've seen child marriage, the child bride. I've seen Devdasi's sister. Though my social conscious was not awakened, the existence, I registered the existence. Then I remember wondering how poor people can be, what abject poverty there used to be, in the Bellary I grew up in, the small town I grew up in. We lived well because my mother was a teacher and my lived well in the sense, at least a lower middle class existence, a comfortable. We didn't have to struggle for food most of the time, stuff. These people every day had to struggle. Water was an issue for people. So I've seen that firsthand. So for me, I consider myself therefore a grassroots person. And so for me to go into a village like in Chittoor or Anantapur and talk to them, eat their food was not an issue at all. And because my father was Tamilian, I spoke Tamil also. So even the same story, if I went to Tamil Nadu, I feel very much Bodhi language, South Indian language, I don't speak, but I very well understand is Malayalam. I don't speak it, but I understand it almost more than 50% of it I can understand. So that makes it easy for you to mix, to learn a lot, to get into the lives of people, stuff like that. So this was been very valuable when, for instance, after the Beijing issue, the NAVO, the National Alliance of Women, which continued the work of coordinating women's. So now that segues into my role in the women's movement. So I came into the women's movement through this UN World Conference on Women activities. Before that, I was in the NGO sector, but I was doing microfinance, I was doing communications and other stuff, ground level research, surveys and stuff, not policy type interventions or development type interventions. But this gave me, and then you went right from being having some knowledge about the grassroots to national level policy, international policy. You were writing material which figures in the Beijing platform for action. You're helping draft or making changes. You're debating what should go in and what should go out. So this was invaluable, and it is almost all areas. Rural women, yes, tick. Environment, tick. Science and technology, tick. Because I studied, I did a BSc in physics. Have you ever heard of someone studying physics, chemistry and zoology, that's me. There are only two of us in that class, a combination. So I had unique kind of interests and areas of knowledge, and so I continued to build on that. A very curious person, loved to read, so that kept me, and I continue to read in all these areas. So medical science, health, women and health. Immediately, you make a connect when it's policy, when it's funding. So it's easy for me to learn quickly, to empathize quickly, and know how it's very very useful when you're working in the kind of field that I am. So the women's movement, in a way, um, I grew up reading my dad used to buy Femina, used to buy two newspapers, Indian Express and Deccan Herald. I think that's my phone even somewhere. Let me just put it off. Ruthlessly put it off. It is not.
No problem.
And as a result of that kind of continuous engagement, it was easy for me to move to talk in all these areas, work in these policy areas, become part of policy dialogues. Um, and when I finished my assignment with the UN World Conference on Women, I had immediately I just got married at that time. That year, I got married in September '94, and '95 I was fully into this work, traveling and all that. And so they asked me. One of the jobs I did while in that was prepare a book. It is called Women in India: Profiles and Her Stories. Here and there you might come across it's a landscape kind of a book with life stories of some 20 women from all over South India. So there's a fisher woman, there's a Devdasi woman, there's a tribal woman, there's a girl child, there's an old woman, people like that. Grassroots women's stories with pictures. So it was a lovely project, a wonderful photographer, and I traveled all over South India, captured it, got it published, and carried it to Beijing. So it was Beijing, the book, and they said, "What's next after this?" I said, "I'm ready to have a baby." Yes, it happened because my daughter was born in September the following year. So, so it was very interesting, very, very fluid time. And that was also the time when the Dalit issue became quite famous. If you remember, shortly thereafter, in the year 2000, for the first time, the Durban conference took place. And but my Dalit consciousness was not awake. I mean, I was not aware of anything to do with Dalit in my life. So this is the other big thing that happened. So I used to stop, and when Ruth Manorama was one of the key figures in this whole process. And so even before we went to Beijing, we inaugurated the National Federation of Dalit Women in Delhi, just before leaving to Beijing. So it is the NAVO, which is a network of women's organizations all over India, came much later. That is after we came back from Beijing. NFTW was started, even before we went, prior to that. So for me, the Dalit, I was thoroughly aware of what is going on, but for me, it was not. It was not a visceral thing. It was not something that I connected with. It was them. It's not us for it, but it was them, the Dalit women, they, kind of a situation. In the year 2000, somebody asked me, why didn't you go to Durban? Why didn't Ruth take you to Durban? One thing, why should Ruth take me to Durban? What's that got to do with me? I said, she should have taken me. Like the point didn't drop. But actually, when I asked Ruth, she said, you had two small babies. Because I told him my first baby was born in September of '95. No, she was born in July. September, my son was born the next year. So, 13 and a half months. So the nurses who looked after me when my daughter was born, Cynthia's baby. Oh, this is Cynthia's baby number 2. They still hadn't forgotten my face. We were going back for the vaccinations and all that. So two quick babies in babies in quick succession, 13 months. I continued to work, and that time I was also doing gender training. I worked at a disability workshop because they gave us quarters, and my husband had by then got his transfer to Bangalore from. He was in Bellary, he got transferred. So we lived on the quarters there, and I ran this disability workshop. It was a new field to me, but because I told you I have an interest in, I almost got into medical college actually. It was a narrow miss. God diverted me away from that. Maybe what I'm doing now, medicine anyone can study, but what I'm doing now I think is special. So I had great interest in medical science. So I started reading books that had been kept in the library, and I started, looking at actually diagnosing the disabilities that used to be brought. So it was very interesting, but also very emotionally harrowing experience living in and doing that work, disability, workshop.
This was all at the same time as when the Durban conference was.
Yes,
taking
around
place.
yeah, the babies to play. That's also it was a very very I don't know productive time I would say now thinking back over it. And I used to write articles, and then I used to travel. I told you I traveled to Andhra Pradesh. That was also part of the time I used to do that. And you take me once or twice I took the babies, but much of the time I used to leave them and then go. And one of the important things that we did at that time was my friend, some of you might know Sharad Dawla, who used to be in the Indian Institute of Management, he was teaching sociologist. So he and I were co-trainers in that NGO area, and then we discovered that some fisher communities were losing their fishing areas because the government had taken over that space, that beach, so a series of beaches, and had given it to a port. It was going to be privatized into a port by a private company. We were able to mobilize them in such a way, motivate the leaders of that community, their sangrams, the women, and because Sharad was himself, his PhD was in something to do with trade unions or something. Somehow he managed to actually communicate with the fisheries department, with the environment and all that, and we got that entire plan scuttled, so that beach survived, and like 5 fishing villages. At that time, the catch in that beach was about 5 crores. They used to export. Almost everything used to be exported. So those 5 crores were actually being was the production of these 5 villages. So that is 1 crore per village. I mean, just think of it. And everything was going to go, waste. It was actually not just a port. It was a ship breaking yard. If you know what ship breaking yards do, they just ruin the environment. So that is why we were able to. We got the environment department. It was also within the SEZ. It was just on the beach. So all these things. So that was another important thing we did. Really important. And so then to come back to this Dalit business. So what happened was in the year 2000 when they told me, I'm thinking, why is this happening? Why are they saying this? And so then there's a story. I mean, many of you, if you've heard my lectures here and there, I referred to this issue. And I applied for a position, and I did a good interview. I was 5 or 6 ladies were there at that interview. I knew that I had the right background, training, and experience. I was confident of being selected. I waited for 2 months. Then by now they should have chosen it. It was quasi-government institution. They must have made a decision to choose. Then I ran. Finally, I did a thing. I just rang that office and said, "Has the SPD been selected?" I said, "Yes, we are. Our new SPD is here." So then I realized. Then I asked, "What's her name?" Then they told me, and that sort of triggered some questions in my mind. Till then, the coin hadn't dropped. So this girl was actually, I knew her slightly because we all went to the same school in Bellary. She had two or three others, there were a set of three sisters. She was junior, she was in my mother's class. Her elder sister, two elder sisters were senior to me. So I recognized her at once. She said, yeah, that's me, I mean, that's my sister and that's me, yeah, who are you? I said, I'm Cynthia Stephen, Mrs. Stephen's daughter. She said, yeah, I remember you and all that. So her dad was one of the central services officers. So he was posted in that place. And so that's how I remembered her. But she was a Brahmin and she had a PhD, but zero experience. She worked as a lecturer. But the position I had interviewed for was a grassroots organization's head. It's a kind of a, and so then I said, okay. Then if I tell her surname, you'll know exactly what happened. Her surname is Vedant. So you'll know what I mean. So I'm saying, how come this happened? So then I remembered a remark that somebody made while I was preparing for the interview. I said, Cynthia, we want you to apply and be successful. We give you material. We want you to take over. There are a few people we don't want to get into that post. So we're sure you'll do well. So please. So I said, bring your biodata. They said, I'll bring a biodata and submit it. And then they said, oh, okay. So there were two references. One was Ruth Manorama and the other was a lady who was the head of a funding agency. I said, her we know. Shobha, okay, no problem. But Ruth, in this organization, we don't talk about Dalit and all that. She said. Again, I was puzzled. What's this thing about Dalit and all that? Why did she tell that to me? She had said this. So that echoed in my ears. Then I started, oh, is it that these people think that I'm Dalit? Is it that? Because there's no way I could not have been selected for that job. Because I spoke and read Kannada. She also spoke and read Kannada, but I also spoke other languages. And then I've had years of experience in the ground, and international and national experience. How the heck can that be? So it was not a professional choice. I too have been in position of hiring people. So I know what goes into choosing staff. So then I said, okay, so then this is something I need to look into. And then I started asking myself, how are they looking at me as a guy? So then I had no answer. At first I thought, oh, it must be because I'm a South Indian. So a lot of people, interviewers, majority of them must be North Indian bias. Then I said fair, people look for fair looking people. So they maybe color wise. Then I thought maybe because I'm a Christian, many people know that's how I know actively one position, one office, they said, what do you do for everything? I said, I sing in the choir. I don't go out anywhere. I go to church on Sundays and I sing in the choir. No other, not much else. Out I went. I was on a program officer kind of. No chance I got after that. If you say that you're Christian and all that, even though my name says so, you have to not talk about it. So I thought it must be because of that. I thought it was religion. It wasn't. I thought it was color. It wasn't. Finally, it had to be caste. I concluded that was the one thing that, and so that also made me understand. That was not the only. It was actually the last series of 4 similar things that happened to me. I told you I had 2 small babies and I was trying to get back into the mainstream. I'm not a disability activist. Mainstream is writing policy, that kind of stuff. And I was trying to interview. So I interviewed 3 or 4 places. And all of them shortlisted me and didn't hire me. I thought that's when I was thinking, oh, maybe it's because I'm a woman head of the organization, management, It wasn't gender, it wasn't color, it wasn't religion. It ended up because if you talk about religion, I know a lot of girls like Syrian Christians, though fair-skinned girls were Christians, were in all kinds of positions in religions. And what is it that makes me different from them? The fact that I'm a dark-skinned uh, Dravidian Christian is equal to must be Dalit. This is the simple equation that people have in their heads, and I didn't even know a thing about it because we did not have any such exposure in our family or in our churches. We did not have it. I know there are some churches there in Tamil Nadu places like that where that sort of stuff happens. So these are some of the things, important things that happened in the way I grew up, what I studied, where I studied, Delhi, and in a small village. The people in Bangalore, people as well, did you study in Mounts? I said, no, I studied in Bellary, small colleges and private small colleges. But because I was always a citizen of the world, always consuming a lot of media, very aware, very curious. So that gave me a lot of this is another thing, very interesting stuff I want to tell you. I was in the Sandur is a small village, if you remember. Then it was a very small village. Taluk town. It had one of everything. It had one hospital, one theatre, one post office, one college, one English medium school, one Kannada medium school. One of everything. That kind of very very cute place. No railway station, one bus stop. But it had a library, and school principal used to buy the best of books. So I had in my that school library, I had access to books by Sartre and Tom. So I actually used to read those kind of books when I was in college. So principal used to look to see what were the choice of books and smile to herself, it seems. Only my page, so everyone had a page. My page will fill up quickly because every day I'm borrowing books and reading. So these are the sort of things that, I used to read, listen to the radio like everything. I told you, we used to buy newspapers and magazines like that. So then at that time there were also lots of reports in the newspaper, in the magazine, particularly Feminine and University Weekly, about all the things that used to happen nationally about women's, the dowry deaths used to happen. There were protests that Mahila Dakshata Samiti used to fight. There's so many, and then the violence against women issues used to be reported in that. So I grew up reading that in my childhood, in my school days. So that had a very sharp impact when I was growing up. So when I came to the women's sector of work, it was not without education. I had, as a child, received a lot of this kind of information, read a lot, known a lot about it. So these were all, that lent some kind of, so when I became a gender trainer and I started training in different languages, also my exposure to the villages and how people live and the experience of poverty and their talents. So I evolved my own system of gender training. I call it the South Asia model. And it's a very interactive, it's difficult to put into words. You can't make it into a module because it depends on the kind, if we work with the people in the group and we use their life experiences as a learning process. We get them to speak and then we use that, we make stories and skits and songs and it becomes very interactive. So I know Maraa does a lot of performance related stuff. And I use a lot of theatre, song, and performance in my training. And everyone, usually people who go to gender trainings go out feeling terribly challenged, burdened, aware of a lot of inequality, injustice that they have suffered, that they are seeing. They become aware of a lot. It's a way of, you can't unsee it. Once you see the injustice, you can't unsee it. So you become different, it changes you. But the kind of impact that my training style, the people used to go out floating on air because somewhere they had the tools to also transform themselves and know how to help others be transformed. So that used to, so some people used to say, I don't know, when my people come to your gender training, they're so happy and there's so much of energy. Sometimes to XYZ gender training, they come back very depressed and upset and feeling, guilty and angry and frustrated and all that. That's never the case. So I used to, my trainings are like that. So this is another important thing that I have got. But anyway, I have a painful story about that. I come to it in a bit perhaps if it comes naturally. So this is so finally when I realized that this was at this around the same time I got hired as state program director in MESA. MESA is a South India level integrated development program. So they used to work with Adivasis, children, Dalit, women, environment, these kind of things. And then the overlaps, there were a lot of overlaps. There was also a lot of movement building. And they were a kind of apex funding body for all these groups. So they were not only doing orientation and training, they were also doing funding for them. So it was a very nice, challenging experience. But that was another watershed moment. I mentioned the name of the organization, but I won't say I won't mention any more names because these are personal lives. But one senior gentleman in that organization was very fond of taking young staff, female staff, to field visits, a lot and stuff like that. And we were movement builders. We were building movements. So we used to have women and men from movements come and talk to us. We used to train them and work with them on campaigns and stuff. And so one day, one woman leader of one movement said, are these two people staying in that room together in a training context? Now this was like it was something I had to deal with. Now that it's come in your face, when you're working together, their colleagues, you respect their space, you don't want to talk about it, etc. This is what people think. But now we know that there is something called, a sexual harassment at the workplace type of thing. Then we didn't have that we are talking about roughly 20 years ago. We didn't have that kind of language for it. I'm saying respect them, it's their choice, they're adults, that kind of stuff. So then I didn't say anything to this senior gentleman. I spoke to another senior person who was in the management, and I said, sir, these women are asking me this question. This is embarrassing for me as a program director and for my staff, for mixed men and women. Please, I request you to please tell this gentleman not to make it so obvious. I mean, we understand that they are adults and all that. Now, what did this man do? He should talk to this man. But see, this is the other side of it. And that is that one, men don't like to give up their sexual and authoritative privilege, and they don't like being questioned, even though it seems straightforward and common sense to question this, but that is not taken up. And it's taken very badly. I ended up losing I ended up losing my job. I mean, went through a difficult path, and I don't regret it, not for 1 minute. But that was another important thing that happened, and I lost a very, very nice. I told you I like the job, I like my colleagues, I like the organization, but this is not good. Anyway, ultimately that organization didn't last very long because word gets around, right? So the organization now no longer exists. Yeah. So that is another important thing. Anyway, so those are some of the things that I'd like to. You might want to take. That was a very long answer to a very complicated question.
Yes. No, I think it was just a way to also try and understand the different chapters of who you've been, because when I was speaking to you on the phone, I got the sense that it's many different lives lived in one. So I just asked that question to kind of set that at that context. But I wanted to kind of hone in on the period of work that you've been doing within with the women's movement, and the work that you've done since, and to try and actually address what the title of what this talk is, which is the silences that you have kind of. I'm not so sure if they might only be silences. Maybe there are also ruptures or disagreements. I'm not sure if silence is the only word actually, but what have been some of the persistent kind of um, power dynamics or hierarchies that you've witnessed in your time with the women's movement, and can we unpack what the women's movement means?
I'd say two things. Women's movement, yes, we should think and talk about that. But I also want to talk about funding dynamics, power and funding dynamics, and I want to talk about culture, organizational culture, and the dynamics that go with it, particularly if it's something to do with the government.
Mm-hmm.
So we should also talk about it. So yeah, you are right about that observation about the beds is silencing or not. No, as a matter of fact, a lot of the stuff that I've had, the experience that I've had, are because I will not be silent. So I've tried not to be silent. For instance, the last example I gave you, I lost my job. That was not a good thing. It was a big job that I had. I lost it. Subsequent experience, that story is also good because that again now segues into the dynamics and aspects that now. When I became it's interesting that I was listening to some conversations yesterday, and it's interesting that if I juxtapose the conversations I had yesterday with what I'm going to say now, you will see how much of these things actually overlap. Money, power, and institutions, relationships. That job that I didn't get, I told you, I actually ended up in that post much later. What happened was this lady Veda who quit after 8 long years. While leaving, she told her team, only Cynthia can do this job. Don't accept anybody else. Make sure she applies, and I'm sure she will be selected. So these people I got from 2-3 different apply. I'm saying, this is so long ago. Do I want to do this? Should I apply or not? I've done so much more after that. Should I be doing this? Should I do it? Anyway, let's say 8th was the last date. At 5 o'clock on 8th, I posted my application. It did not reach by 5:30. Nobody opened the email at 5:30 to know that it has arrived. I think it went at 6 or something. So the time had gone. So the organization put another small classified ad, called again for applications, then took my application into account, then held the interview, and then got the job. And that was another interesting experience because that was, I told you, it's a quasi-government job, this one. And so first time I'm seeing the government, how it works from the inside, and I'm enjoying it because there's so much you can do within the system, from within the system. And if you're able to get secretary of your department, this job was this organization is under the primary education department because it had to do with education, women's education. And it was an empowerment program, but education was a big part of it. So we were saying girl-child education, we were talking about health, we were talking about political participation, everything under the group of education. So we could really do a lot. For instance, I'll give one example. We had presence in, I think, 18 districts in some 36 taluks. Not in 18 districts, not all taluks, certain selected taluks. So that was a good chunk. I used to say I'm deputy CM because I have 18 districts. But we had 300 staff, and I think 25 to 30,000, no, 1 lakh women in our centers. We had 60,000 girls in our Kishori Sangams, 40,000 boys in Kishora Sangam. That really large operation. Nobody knows about it. It's gone to dogs now. Nobody, funding is gone. But there was one time when there was a campaign about Panchayat Raj, about the powers to the Panchayat. They were only giving 6,000 per Panchayat per year. Can you believe that? Not enough to pay the electricity bill. So they are saying, give us devolve financial powers. Then one organization that is Concern for Working Children, they have a section which works on Panchayat Raj. So they were doing a struggle. They said, Cynthia, can you help us? Immediately saw what is the problem. They were trying to mobilize, nobody is coming. Who will come to Bangalore? Everybody, all Panchayat Raj people are sitting in surrounding districts. One mail went saying, mobilize all the. We used to have teams which worked on particular area. One in Sangams, we had 5 women working on health, 5 women working on education, 5 on child, 5 on Panchayat Raj. Just this, imagine how many women we had, like 12 buses drive down from Bidar to Belgaum and all that. And our girls did a great job. We had like 2,000 women from all over this Karnataka come. When we went to Freedom Park, there was a shamiana and there was so many chairs. This much of people were there. When our women went, the thing was overflowing. That was the amount of mobilization we could get. But of course, I was asked a government organization. So I quickly exited the scene. I was sitting there for a while. When the time came for, let's like the land, where is madam? I was not there. I had gone off. I don't want to get into controversy with the government. But we had that kind of money. So that's how you can mobilize. That was the networking was so powerful. So sure, not once but twice we did it. Both times the government backed out. So that is how we can swing things happen, make things happen. So, but then eventually, there were things like, there was one lady who is a Brahmin and won't, so very vegetarianism is the deal. Nobody brings any non-veg there. Everybody mixed group, like Gaudas are there, other people are there, but they will only bring chitranga and masranga. And sometimes girls, the timings were very harsh. They have to come early morning. So people are going home hungry or not eating lunch or no. So I said we'll cook food in there. We have a girl who is there, one Kyun is the English woman. We'll all pay so much every day for lunch. The money collected, we'll buy and choose what you want to eat. So we're getting fresh mudde and anna, saru, sambar, masru, vegetable, everything. Occasionally we will have chicken also. So and then little by little we have to break all these stuff. And girls' health is going down. Then also they had in the previous dispensation, girls would only go home at 6, 7 o'clock. I said, if you finish your work 5 o'clock, go home. Don't wait. They were, "Ma'am, we can go now. Facilitator, they were so surprised. That kind of culture, space for ourselves is not there. We try to bring all that in. Anyway, the girls started enjoying their work. We did a lot of stuff. Hiring people became because of this. And then I also organized trainings on that organization talks about this organization is especially for the SCs, STs and minorities. I'm saying, where are the SCs? Where are the STs? No STs, no SCs. Only in the field area we'll find a few. And say, let's orient everybody into it. We are holding for every district, we are hiring one person to go and talk about Ambedkar's vision for the country. And then we're making chicken in the office. One way we moved office one day right in the middle, like this hall is there. Here there's a big room. They were coding there. So here there was a big thing. He said, what big 11-foot curtain and hung it up. These girls, pooje ಮಾಡಬೇಕು and all that. Saying, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಈಗ ಆಫೀಸ್ ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ಬೇಡ ನಾವಿದೆಲ್ಲ ಆಯ್ತು ಸರಿ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರು ಪಾಪ ಓನರ್ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ರಲ್ಲ ಬಾಗಿಲು ಹಾಕ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ನಾವು ಡಿಸ್ಟರ್ಬ್ ಆಗಲ್ಲ ಯಾರು go to the field, and we all used to hire residential areas, no? In the shops, houses in the residential areas. So they will have in the hall itself they'll have these puja rooms. So these girls will all do puja. Though I didn't openly say anything, don't do and all of that. I'll say, see, I think we should focus on women oriented, not religion oriented things. So like that we used to try. So I encountered these things. I think eventually a combination of all this, the fact that I'm Cynthia, the fact that I'm talking about Angarika, I'm asking where are the SCs and STs, trying to hire them, where are the minorities, hardly any minority women on the team. If there are minority women on the team, somehow they will try to harass them and get them. And I'm checking their employment record. Really, did she take leave? Did she really? Why is she being let go? Like that. So this slowly, eventually snowballed because as I said, in the management there were only Lingaites, Gauda girls and Indian girls, upper caste girls, no Brahmins. There's one lady who was a Brahmin, old lady. Finally, she had to get her. She couldn't bus sakti barod pura kashta avane. Finally, she was the one who used to say, "I will only sit here. I will, lunch here. Anyway, one day we had, but when we shifted office, pura barakagala madam, she's proper. Like that, we had to deal with all this. But eventually, it's the same story. Some anonymous letters, some relentless RTIs, blackmailing to the court, and nothing to do with me. These had everything to do with the fellow who was filing the RTI and my predecessor. But he came and saw me. I said, see, I don't know what your problem is. I will take a look at the file. If it's valid, what you're asking, we will give you. Because he was a part-time worker, he was claiming more than the rules allowed. And to add to the fact, please note that his name ended with Kamal. So, yellow and kadeno, you are treated like an outsider. You don't fit. You see? So these are all some of my experiences. So eventually my contract, if you keep this, I know this is being recorded, I think I should say it. Okay, there's no point in not saying it. The person who could have approved the renewal of my contract was the secretary of the department. I got a call one day. We were having budget issues. Money was coming late and all that. So we were struggling to pay salaries. We were managing to pull from this side and put it in and then take it out. So we were struggling like this. So, Madam, sir, request came. At that time, the good quality phone, Apple phone was 25,000-30,000. ಒಂದು ಹೈ-ಎಂಡ್ ಫೋನ್ ಬೇಕಂತ ಸರ್ಗೆ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದು ಹೈ-ಎಂಡ್ ಫೋನ್ ಬೇಕಂತ ಒಂದು 25,000-30,000 ಫೋನ್ ಬೇಕಂತ. ನನ್ನ ಹತ್ರ ಎಲ್ಲಿದೆ ಸರ್? ನನ್ನ ಹತ್ರ ಬಡ್ಜೆಟೇ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಎಲ್ಲಿಂದ ನಾನು ಲೆಕ್ಕ ತೋರಿಸಿ ಆಗೋದೇ ಇಲ್ಲ ಸರ್. ಐ ಡಿಡ್ ಯು ಥಿಂಕ್ ಟ್ವೈಸ್. ಕಷ್ಟ ಸರ್, ನಮಗೆ ದುಡ್ಡು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬಡ್ಜೆಟ್ ಸ್ಯಾಲ್ರಿ ಕೊಡೋದು ದುಡ್ಡಿಲ್ಲ ಸರ್. ಸಾರಿ ಸರ್. And after a while he called. I said, come and meet me in the office. And he asked me to come on a day when he has visiting hours, 3 to 5. So at 3 o'clock I was there. He said, sit in that corner. He has a big office because he put these 3 rooms together, it will be his office. So one corner there's a sitting area, one corner there's an area where lots of people can sit and talk. That's like a dining area, a table line. And his desk is here, okay? And he's 50-60 people. In 2 hours, he dealt with everybody, cleared the room. I'm still sitting there and watching and waiting. I wasn't clearly watching actually. I was deep in my own stuff, probably using my phone or something. Then Then everybody is out of the room. Only the pure, I, and this gentleman. He calls me to, okay, come and sit. I didn't sit, I was standing. He didn't tell me to sit. He said, you can come here. He was also standing. Then he opens, he has this L-shaped table. This side is a desk where we keep things and all that. Drawer and all this stuff. So open the drawer. He carry, the fellow sells fruits. He keeps on carry bag, plastic carry bag, white or black, whatever. White carry bag, not even a black one. Then he opens his drawer, pulls it out, and starts putting stacks of notes from the drawer into the bag. He filled that bag with money in front of me, and then he is discussing why he's doing that. He's talking about money. Now, you need not think that you are going to be continued, okay? I said, sir, yeah, okay, but there is a process, sir. You have to have an interview. There's a committee that has to be called. National program director has to come. Okay, she is IAS? I said, yes. Which year? I said, I don't know. You should know these things. I went and checked. She is 6 years junior to this guy. Okay. Anyway, okay, you settled it. We have the meeting. We have the committee. Okay. After the committee, of course, my women's committee members were here. The senior women were part of the committee. They came back looking shell-shocked. Continue. I was told that if they get a good director, they will not disturb that person. They will keep them. And I mean, by now you have understood that I love working there, and people are quite happy. They're getting terrific results. There are 10 such programs across the country. Ours was easily the best. And so they were shocked that, this was happening. I wasn't shocked, but I knew. He told me, he'd already told me I won't be continuing. My national program director's face was so small. She was so upset. He was very fond of me. He was doing a good job with my work. I'm so sorry, I hope we meet again. Anyway, that's the story I won't tell now. There's another big story there. But anyway, this is how, the system, when you're within a system, you encounter the system, when it's going in its own well-oiled way, if nobody is asking any questions or doing things any different, nothing works, nothing will change. If you immediately start, a little bit of grit here, a little bit of friction there, a little question here, question there, it happens. Now, one of the biggest things that has happened in the women's movement in India is, I don't know whether you're aware of this or not, but there has been this huge schism, I can say, in the women's movement. When was this now? 2005, there was an autonomous women's meeting that took place in Calcutta. And we had gone from here, all of us, some of us. And there was this, the bar girls controversy had just ended or was still ongoing or something. So if you remember the bar girls controversy, anyone knows about it?
Yes or no?
There was one. There used to be bar girls, bar dancers in Mumbai, and girls used to be dancing there. There was once there was an ACP who was a Dalit, and he banned ACP or DCP or something. He banned the dancing of girls. He says our girls shouldn't be doing this. And there was one section of women who were saying he's good, we are losing our dignity, he's upholding the dignity of women. Another section of women were saying this is their livelihood, they are being, So this bar girl controversy was understood. And then, so some of these women came there. And from both sides, they were there. So the Dalit and Bahujan women's movements in Maharashtra, of course, were talking in favor of the ban. And there were the other women, the more privileged sections, who also happened to be funded NGOs, not movements, funded NGOs. They say that they are movements. They do say that they are movements. movements. They say, for example, there's one group called VAMP.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yes,
There's one called VAMP. What is it? Something.
Mukti Parishad is what it ends with, but the first word I think is in Marathi.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting name actually. And then there are one or two other groups like that. And so they came and they were talking and asking, and I remember a similar thing that happened. A similar debate had happened in Tirupati when I had done the gender training. And so the people who were participating, some of them were from sex workers groups, unions, and some were of course Dalit women who had worked in the field and all that, and who have seen all sorts of stuff that happened. So there was this dialogue that was happening. The NGO, which was headed by an elderly lady, was organizing with the sex workers community, and that the leader of that sex workers union was a woman with 3 children, and
the leader of the sex
workers union was a woman with 3 children, and she was a very bright thing. Her children were in their teens, and she was also doing a BA. She was studying for her BA. She had, I think, only studied 9th or 8th or something. And after starting this work, she decided she wanted to increase her qualification. So she did 10th, and then she did 12th, and then she was doing her BA. Then we asked, where are your children? I kept them in a hostel. They don't know our work. All these women, they say, our children don't get to know all the things. We keep our life away from them. They are very clear. We are very clear to keep. We tell them that we are working in somebody's house, doing housekeeping or cooking or looking after babies or something. We never let them know what we are actually doing. So this I've had in my mind. So when these women from Bombay, Maharashtra, all parts of Sangli, there's one, this map is from Sangli.
It's a Vaishya and
Vaishya and Vaishya. That Vaishya word didn't come to me.
Yeah.
But anyway, so no, let's see, of course everyone has dignity and you have to preserve that, no question. But, so these women start asking them, the Maharashtrian women from these Dalit women, the leaders, women's leaders. See, अच्छा, आपका जो organization का जो director है ना, उनके बच्चे क्या करते हैं, क्या पढ़ते हैं? One is doctor, one is engineer, one is. आपके बच्चे क्या करते हैं? इतना अच्छा काम है, तो उनके बच्चे क्यों इसमें नहीं छूटते वो लोग? आपके बच्चे इसमें आने से कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं, लेकिन उनके बच्चे क्यों नहीं इसमें आते हैं? Then you could see that they're thinking, they're making, trying to make connections. So there is this huge issue, and it is a class-caste divide in the women's movement, where sexual labor and reproductive labor is considered to be the right of the women from the marginalized sections and the working classes. And we should and will organize them to stay in that. We will get funding. We will have NGOs. We will get cross salaries. We will have establishments to organize these women and ensure that they continue this like that. So this has been a very major issue, and this is actually a manifestation in the movement of the same class-caste dynamics that have characterized it from the beginning. So when I came in, I was in my 30s, I think, when I came in. I was in my 30s when I came into the women's UN thing as communication. I had already had 10 years of experience in the field and as a journalist as well as working in NGOs. So I was not shaped by what they think. I had my own experiences and shaped, and had by then acquired quite my own spurs in my field. So I was not at all in awe of any of these, highfalutin feminists who are part of that. Yeah, let's the clear hierarchy there. Okay. If you haven't already heard about it or haven't read it, there's one EPW article, one epic EPW article by Gopal Guru called Dalit Women Talk Differently. It was about the starting of the NFTW.
Yeah.
Why did he find the need to write that? Why did he find the need to write that? That is important to know. And that is exactly what I was also present. But see, Gopal Guru is professor in JNU, Baba. Hum tak kuch bhi nahi hai. So when you start asking questions like I'll give you an example. There was a training kind of a program that was made for women activists on gender, and one of the very senior and much respected feminists were there. And I raised a question about, then at that time there was a lot of thing about indecent exposure of women's bodies in advertising and how they're using it, in a very offensive manner. I raised that issue on that, and then the response of the feminist leader was, yeah, but taking off women's clothes is a political statement. And so if I saw if there is a woman here and she's shedding all her clothes in public, she's making a very strong political statement. Then I am thinking to myself, this lady is clueless about women's lives and what clothes mean to women. And she does not know that disrobing a woman is the way you humiliate her in public. That's the dynamic that I know. And so she's very rooted in this country. She has a huge reputation. She still has a very senior person. But I'm telling myself, this lady doesn't. She does not know what she's talking about. She doesn't have the experience of it. So this is the way. This is the kind of basically insensitivity, I would say. Their class and privilege makes them insensitive to the lived realities of women. I've seen women wearing tattered and torn saris. They don't have. I actually know this. Women they go to the river, have bath, wrap a sari, dry out half the sari, wrap themselves in half, wait for it to dry. Then they will wrap this half and dry out the wet half because they don't have an extra sari. They don't have an extra piece of cloth to put on themselves while they are. I know, I've seen it myself. When such is the case, where's the question of anyone, thinking they're making a political statement, distributing themselves in public? So this is the kind. This for me that's an epic example of what is wrong with what has been wrong with the feminism. It's only now. See, at that time in the 90s and the early 2000s, there wasn't even proper language to articulate this. It's only after younger generations went through the Dalits and marginalized sections, went to university in the 90s and 2000s, they started encountering these questions, started articulating their experiences and writing about them. The Roundtable India is one such space. Sparks, we had a magazine because I was one of the founding team of Roundtable India. That there was a foundation, and we all set it and got it going. Of course, it all has changed hands. We used founding group, drifted a bit in other things. I lived here, so I was not in Delhi, so it sort of changed hands. But it was one of those. It was then that really the language started to be used. The Ambedkarite youngsters started challenging these positions, and we started getting a language. So what I was writing could not be easily swallowed or digested by anybody. So I have this very old essay which I wrote at that time, and you can access some of it. I haven't published it in full because I want to make it the centerpiece of a book and the theme of publishing. But that is that language where you're talking. Whereas I'm looking for a language. So there was a time when this Dalit feminism, the term Dalit feminism was used. When I did a master's in women's studies, you know, after coming out of coordination unit. And at the time when I was working, that was the other thing I did. Along with gender training, working full time for disability, having two babies, I also took a master's in women's studies. And at that time, when I had gone there for contact classes to the university, the first time I heard the term Dalit feminism. And I'm not exaggerating when I told you, when I first that word fell on my ear, my gut clenched. You know what I mean? My stomach churned. And I couldn't understand that visceral reaction. It was literally visceral reaction. And it took me a while, some weeks I think, to work out what could it be. And I realized at that point that what I knew about Dalit in my own experience and what I might know about feminism in my own field, they were mutually exclusive. And the juxtaposition was an oxymoron. That was the subconscious reaction that I had. That was what happened. So if this is the case, then what's the word? What's the right thing to say then? How to describe what we're having? See, that word also, that phrase also was coined by Sharmila Negi, who I respect a lot for the kind of work she's been doing. Right? I love that she's and she has brought down some very good students, no doubt about it. Original writing, I respect that. But this I can't agree with. So anyway, so I sought, and one day, while I was in UTC, United Theological College has a Women's Studies department, we had a colloquium, 3 days colloquium. In that, that's when I met some women from abroad there. They said, "Have you heard of the term?" I was talking to them outside there. They had come for something else, we went there for something else, having tea in a common area, and then I told them what we were doing. Then have you heard about womanism? Is what they asked. No, I hadn't heard about womanism. So I just went. It doesn't figure in any of the academics here. It's a big thing in the West. So then I started reading up on it, and then I realized that it's the exact term and the background of it. You can read about this exploration in an article which there's only one article of mine in medium.com.
Yeah.
So if the link is there, but I've discussed that in quite extensive detail in that. That's my first thing. I moved on from there. I no longer say Dalit feminism because it's not an inclusive term. One thing about the Dalit idea, the Dalit people, that they are inclusive people. By nature, at least the ones I have encountered in my own life, they are inclusive. They try to bring everybody within there and embrace change or diversity. They never try to exclude. And so I felt that to use that term makes it exclusive. And many people will be excluded by using that term.
So now, using the phrase Dalit feminism.
Yeah, that Dalit feminism. So now I've changed, because as I said, no, not Dalit feminism, Dalit womanism. I won't go into great detail about what I'm saying, but you can read, there's plenty of stuff I've written now about feminism. There's a review of a book I did. There's a book called Dalit Feminism, I did a critical review of it, which Frontline carried. So you can search for it. It's probably behind a paywall, but
you shared the full text with me. I've shared it.
You have shared, yeah. I asked actually.
It was behind a paywall.
Yeah. So I asked somebody to send me a PDF. So a friend who works in her thing, she went in and brought out a PDF which I've saved. in which I critically examined uh, why there is a silencing of the term humanism. This term I have published I put it out in the public domain in 2005 or 2006. The book comes out I think in 2000, just before COVID, like 1950. 15 years, minimum of 15 years it's been out. But the term is even not even, so that's a silencing. Even to go a little further, in fact, two other very respected left-oriented publications, I sent it to. One accepted it and put it in the print queue. And then they wrote to me saying they can't use it. Another, okay, I said, fine, I could expect that from them already. I'd already put them in this blacklist, you know. But because the girl kept on saying, Tai, if you can please get it published in a reputed journal, it will help me. So I said, I'll send it to them. And this, ultimately, first they said okay, and later on they rejected it. I wasn't too shocked. I wasn't shocked. I was surprised but not shocked. The other one, I sent it to another popular net domain, I won't mention it. They never even acknowledged it. Meaning that they didn't even want to acknowledge that it existed or that I'd sent to. And earlier I had written for them.
It's not that. What do you feel were their grounds for rejection? Like what was their objection of moving from feminism to humanism? Because I think that's also how you've written it in the review that you've done of the Dalit feminist reader. You've argued why Dalit feminism is a limited, how do I say, like a limited explanation or limited category for Dalit women's experience. And you've gone on to explain why feminism. But what do you feel is the tension from the other end?
See, there is a lot of hypocrisy. Because there are vested interests, there are academic vested interests who don't want to acknowledge. See, I'm a non-academic thinker and writer, intellectual. I'm not in any institution. This one goes against the institutional norm, no? Sarmila Reddy was inside a university. I'm nowhere of that. I'm nothing of that sort. So I'm an independent academic. So if they give credence to my point of view, then their legitimacy. This is one thing. The other thing is, I've named people, and critique their. One of the people I encountered who's talked to me and who invited me, Nivedita Menon, she came across in Kafila. I made a comment. I don't usually go to Kafila, but at one point I still was going. I made a comment in one of their thing, and she said such a sane comment. I made such a sane comment in what she said. So she invited me over for something and maybe speak for something. She was kind of happy with what I had said. So I think all that enabled people to realize that there was some stuff involved. See, there is a reluctance to accept non-academic intellectualism. Even someone like in Karnataka, we have the largest number of Jnanpith awards. But the last award was given to a man focused on folk literature, folklore. He was a folklorist expert, right? He was also a well-noted director, he's an author, respected in every level. I mean, he was vice chancellor of Hampi University. But we had someone well-known literary had a comment to say he does not deserve the Jnanpith only because of the content of his writing. Because the academic canon doesn't like to admit of other thinkers to their space. They find it uneasy. Someone who what is your provenance? I mean, okay, you have a master's. See, compare that with what happened was when I some years later. When was this? Was it just before COVID? Around the same time as that. In 17 or 18, I think I went to the US, And before I went to the US, the people who invited me circulated a note saying Cynthia is coming. Anyone wanting to invite her for any talks, please let us know. They got 40 emails inviting me, including from the Gender Studies Department of Harvard, from the Gender Studies Department of University of California, Berkeley. Then I was also invited to speak at a seminary which is part of Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. All these people knew my work. I didn't know these things. Why? Because okay, there's another politics that I didn't mention. Again, another important. At the time when I started writing and thinking about all this, the internet had just begun to, and I had written to one magazine, the magazine that rejected this thing.
Review.
Then I had written to them. I told you I put them on a blacklist, and I only relented because a girl was asking me. So I sent a pitch to them to carry this essay that I had written. They ignored completely the fact that who am I? They don't know me from Adam. I'm not from any university, any college. I'm not a lecturer. They just ignored me. Then I told myself, I won't allow these guys to gatekeep my knowledge. I'll put it out in the public domain. So I started writing for something called countercurrents.org.
Yes.
And all my very good articles, which were all written freshly when I was just newly minted thoughts, you will find in countercurrents.org. People, they were searching for material, and I was told that many of you would have heard about Temuri Soundarajan. Yeah, she was the girl who was behind that Cisco thing, and also the Smash Brahminical
Patriarch.
That controversy. She was the one who invited me actually. Then at that time, things have happened. I mean, much water has flown down, the river since then. But when she came to India first to meet me, she said that's how she found me on the internet. She saw me on Countercurrent, she read me on Countercurrent, she saw my email there, she wrote to me, and then she came down to meet me. She said, when you look on the internet, only with Dalit women related writing we can see is yours. In 2005, 2006, I think. That was the time we did. So that since then, universities around the world, particularly in Australia, in Europe and in America, have been accessing and reading and prescribing my material, studying it. And when I went, everybody knows my work threadbare. I was staggered, and I didn't even know this is going on. You see? So this is the other thing, the exclusion, the other bit of silencing, exclusion, invisibilization is also about academics and institutions and the organic. So when I was invited to Harvard, somebody, I was just saying about how brilliant our culture is with our very common people also having so much of knowledge about their world, how they lead their lives without being really dependent, like I was talking about Adivasis. So their life is so holistic, centered around their environment. They're outside the mainstream economy. Knowledge is so great. So one of the white women who were attending, she says, how will this come into the mainstream? So I stopped and asked her, who is the mainstream? You mean to say Harvard is the mainstream? I said, me, I've never been to university. My master's in women's studies is by correspondence. And even that material, I was way ahead of that material. I was reading on my own. I got to write some exam and get a certificate. But I was writing far more radical stuff than I was reading in my master's. So, which is the mainstream then? So these are the kind of things I've sort of tried, these walls and barriers really. I've tried to break in my own way.
I have a few more questions, but they kind of go in a different direction. So I was just wondering if at this point anybody else has anything to kind of share or ask on this section of what Cynthia has spoken about, which is around silences and assertions and kind of
how the system
yeah,
gets back at you
yeah.
as a result.
Because otherwise it'll be like a lot of different things and then to take.
I was curious
Yeah.
about your the influence of liberation theology because that's also something I think feminism or civil society in general has been reluctant to
Engage with.
I mean, at one point it was, but I think like many other things it was forgotten. So do you think in your work, even today, like there are some valuable lessons from liberation theology?
Oh, 200%. Actually, that time that I was telling you that there was a time when gender was a very nascent field. It was also at the same time, the same time around which Paulo Freire's work was beginning to get popular. And one of the reasons it was getting popular was because the the radical elements or the left-oriented elements in the Catholic Church were using his material a lot. And so a lot of the people, the NGOs which were set up by the Catholic Church or funding agencies which had that background, they were using that material to train these people. So there's a and then there were also very influential trainers like John de Roche, Duarte, who were writing and themselves doing trainings for a large number of social workers at that time. So one generation of social workers grew up having that as part of their uh, training, and somewhere that has had its own impact. And in fact, I get a lot of flack from people when they say that you have very left-oriented thinking, very radical. The radical has not been a word used in my case, but definitely left-oriented is what they have said. The first 2-3 times when I heard that, I'm saying, but I'm hardly that kind of left-oriented. I see myself more as center-left or more to the center, slightly left-leaning, not left, capital letter left. But that is the subliminal effect of liberation theology, definitely. Yeah, very reformative. And you see, a lot of the funding came from Catholic church sources. Liberation theology was taken on wholesale by the ecumenical, rather liberal Protestant churches and the Catholic churches. The more conservative churches are the ones who label such material as left and me as left. Yeah. Even though I might say that I'm a liberal among the ecumenicals, among the evangelicals, and I'm evangelical among them. I sort of try to bridge many worlds. Don't try. By who I am, it seems that I'm bridging these gaps or these areas. So I see that. Thank you for that question.
I also was curious about if there were any kind of silences also, especially for women, even given that in Karnataka there was a Dalit movement which was very strong. So, and in the talk that I was coordinating, I could sense that tension is still unresolved within the Dalit movement in Karnataka and how the leadership. So how do you, I don't know, is it about negotiating space or is it like two different worlds or is it a way of how does one think about?
Actually, that's an interesting question. It's triggered a thought or a question, some reverberations inside me because in Karnataka we have a lot of very vocal and articulate women, including one who's just won an international award. One has amazing stories. They're very, very touching real life stories. And recently I did a review of a book by a woman called Dalit woman, Madiga woman from Chittoor district called The Hungry Goddess and Other Stories, something like that. It's in the current issue of Frontline, I think. You can Google it, it's probably still available. In which the same thing, the women's stories, the women's lives, the harshness, the very, very real presence of insensitive patriarchy which takes away even the most precious little things from them. She articulates in a very sensitive is not the word to use, in a very normal manner. But there is a criticism, there's an inherent critique in it. There's no anger. There is an acceptance, but there is an underscoring. See, this is what has happened. But it's a very gentle voice, which So, so this is there. But I feel in Karnataka, somewhere I feel the Dalit women's, or even the women's voice, the dissenting women's voices are not very evident in the spaces that I have engaged with. You do see some loud voices, you see some bold assertions, but somewhere it is not radical. Somewhere there is for example, Kittur Chennamma. She is a woman who is like, it's similarly the kind of valorization of Jhansi Ki Rani and Kittur Chennamma. If you look at it, they are very similar characters. And so we say, "Ku bloody Mardani, mujhe Jhansi wali Rani thi." So she is celebrated for her masculine, presentation. She presents as very masculine. Yeah. There is that inherent patriarchy there, and even our women celebrate that. Yeah. We are not critical enough about what we celebrate. I think that is the thing. That is the important part. See, even Banu Mushtaq, though she hasn't been very vocal about it, some of the stories, like one story that really touched me deeply, I read it only in translation, but she talks about a couple who are very, very close. The man is very much in love with his wife, looking after her, making flowers, really fussing over her. They have children. Suddenly, they have 3 or 4 children. There's a 5th baby which is born. Shortly after that birth of the 5th baby, the woman dies. So this woman thinks how much she must be affected. But when she goes there, she finds that he's married a 19-year-old girl, just a couple of years older than his eldest daughter, and he's with her, and his daughter is looking after all these children. She hasn't said anything, but there is that inherent, just by saying, "See, this has happened," by making it, by talking about it, it makes you think about the kind of performative man-woman relationships that are normalized. So you buy things for women, you do things for women, but you don't appreciate them for what they are, who they are, what exactly they are like. That has become, I think, that is her, what she is saying in a very subtle and soft way. I don't know whether we've got the kind of radical language in us to articulate the way, say, Akka Mahadevi articulates. Though she talks about romantic love for her Channamallikarjuna, even in that romantic love, there's a fierceness. Sangam poetry also has a fierceness. I haven't come across that kind of fierce, emotion, fierceness of emotion. My daughter, when I do also write poetry, not a lot, but I do write. And my daughter was saying, "There's so much of anger in your poetry. Why, you're not an angry person. Why do you write angry poetry?" There is an anger in me, but I don't express it the way I normally would, because probably the mahal is like that. Okay, women don't do this, women don't do that. As it is, I'm asking questions and getting thrown out of jobs and whatever, But because of the punishment is quite contained, you don't realize what happened. I was taken to, I took the organization which took away my job, I took them to court. But my lawyer, after losing the case, he said, "You blundered in Maraa. We should not have put you on the bench,
Stand.
on the stand. Because of that, we lost the case. Maraa galti hai. Huh? Galti meri thi na. Because I was talking so boldly. I'm not this humble workman. He was trying to prove that I'm a workman. So these are all the stuff. So you speak up. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. Anyway, I'll be damned anyway. So I'll do it.
Are there any more thoughts, questions? Yeah, Visa.
So, drawing from the experiences that you've shared with us, there's been a lot of shift in the politics, in the technology, in the way the movement has, started from where you started and now what it has become. So, of course, Beijing was a huge turning point from what
In some ways.
In some ways, yeah. So, I just wanted to know what are the shifts that have come in this movement, the intergenerational shifts. Is there a gap? And if there is, how do you bridge it?
Yeah, one of the big things that happens, see, I come from, as you said, this generational shift. I don't believe that is anything to do with generation, purely. It's definitely a question of perspective.
Yeah.
And the perspective, the whole role about the sexual politics, that has always been a part of the women's movement and its articulations. Somewhere I feel what used to be termed the sexual revolution, liberation, whatever, has now swung in the other direction. And so the political aspect of sexual politics and the critique of sexual politics has somewhere lost its way in the biological aspects, in a sense. I mean, I don't mean in a physical biological sense, but in the nitty-gritties. Like when you talk about intersectionality, like the word intersectionality was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw in a legal context, in a rights-based context, where the woman was faced with a structural challenge to her employment. And so because she was black, and because she was female, she could not get her rights, whatever. But then the argument was that this was the reason why she was being so the term intersectionality says a lot, but just like the term gender has at first was so powerful, but now has lost its sting. It has become soggy. It's become soggy now. It lost that zip or the crispness or the crunch that it used to have. I say the same thing has happened to this term called intersectionality, and also the issue of sexuality. And I think that we have now become, it has become a loosely like talking about genders, talking about multiple genders. So then where do you bring the solidarity? Everybody has
it's just hyphen.
Fragmentation. Solidarity, connectivity becomes difficult in such a fragmented condition. Everybody has different issues. You talk about my issues, you talk. Even in the olden days, there was only LGBTQ. Then also the women would say only the homosexual issues are taken up. Only they are mainstreamed. Our voices are not heard. Our problems are not taken up. We are also facing issues. The same thing has only further fragmented things, and therefore there has been a disintegration of the radical potential of organizing and movement building. That's what I would say.
I actually had a thought connected to this in the previous talk that we had with Ram and Rekha, because it was on identity. So we were kind of talking, Rekha and Ram were kind of talking about how in certain contexts there is a kind of a need to assert the self, because the self stands against, say, community identities that are enforced on you, particularly in the case of women, in the case of certain. At the same time, in a country like ours, it's impossible to think of yourself without thinking of it in relation. So this is something that, I mean, just asking you because it's also something we've really been going back and forth with at Maraa, which is this entire, I guess, what's loosely called identity politics right now, which means a whole host of things. And a lot of questions that come up about what the politics of allyship or representation should then be, which is that, for example, how far does lived experience go as an authentic voice? Who should speak for whom? And whether it kind of runs both ways. There is something about identity as a source of collective strength and self-representation. It's also a lot of the things that we've been kind of struggling with in terms of making also space for self-representation. And at the same time, it has what you were mentioning right now, a certain kind of fragmentation and diffusion, which we're seeing not just in the women's movement, I think across social movements. So how do you see these two kind of tensions operating together, the kind of, because of all the silences that you spoke about earlier, there's also a reason why there is a certain self-representation or assertion that's coming out in a particular way now, I feel. At the same time, it's also leading to what you're saying, which is kind of this fragmentation or a polarization. It's also something that the government is feeding actively. So how do you kind of see both of these things? And
See, I'm thinking of the state of Kerala, for instance, where at one level, because of the left oriented thing, there's been a lot of media attention on alternate sexualities. So that's why you have a book written by a woman who's a sex worker,
Yeah.
clearly talking about her work and all that. I would say that kind of work is difficult to find in a place like Karnataka, or that's what I was saying, in Andhra or in Tamil Nadu or in Karnataka. I dare say that kind of work hasn't been done, hasn't been written. I think maybe Revati has written one book on her life. Yeah, it's a biography. I haven't read it, but other than that, there's also a lot of media attention, both positive and negative. And I think the left politics is part of that, context. Here, the left politics are not very strong, so I would say that could be one of the factors in Karnataka. I'm talking only in Karnataka. But see, there's also there's also a useful categorization in the left of this superstructure. And when you come across, when these subtle identities come up against the more solid identities, then that's when push comes to shove. I'm thinking, for instance, of a person I know is a trans person, transiting from male to female. And I was doing a gender sensitization for them, for young group of young people. That person is also a young person. I'm not quite aware. And she was asserting that I'm a Gauda, I'm upper caste. So this is the subtle identity versus the crass or whatever, the more gross identities, social. When they become immediately the assertion, I told you, I mean, even the LGBT, the male identity seemed to be more assertive against the female lesbian same-sex relationship types. So somewhere that power equation, the power dynamics always plays out. No getting away from that. There is no getting away. So the wealthier person will always get their way. The upper caste person, I don't normally use the word upper caste, but it's slipped out. I usually say dominant caste. So the dominant castes can be very assertive about their alternate sexualities. But a religious minority or a caste minority or whatever, a marginalized section, cannot dare to do that. They can get lynched. So this is I think an important factor to keep in mind. On the one hand. On the other hand, we have the phenomenon of the men's movement.
Yeah. So my next question.
Okay, so we can ask it now.
No, carry on.
No, go on.
I mean, this-
I can connect the two.
I was going to ask you, actually, it was a little bit taking off from what Ekta also asked you, because another thing that's kind of been a discussion in, just in terms of our readings and conversations, has been this entire notion of Brahminical patriarchy and Dalit patriarchy as two terms that kind of stand in much writing against the concept of Dalit patriarchy, much writing in favor of the concept of Brahminical and Dalit patriarchy as two kinds of patriarchies that either borrow from each other or in dialogue. So I wanted to know a little bit of your thoughts on that.
Okay, but that is not.
And in connection to that, the men's rights activism that's kind of come up. But yeah,
Yeah, but I don't
you can carry on your
I see
thought
that.
now.
I see there is a. Somehow I don't see these as closely paralleling each other. Dalit patriarchy versus Brahminical patriarchy versus Dalit patriarchy is an artificial,
Binary.
category. Yeah, or a binary. Men's rights issues is again something akin to what I was saying, that the gross versus the subtle. That part. This is also like that. So, but unfortunately, this who is talking about Dalit patriarchy is the question. Who is talking about Dalit patriarchy? Why? What is the social location of the person talking about Dalit patriarchy? That has to be answered. Without going into that, there is no point. Because there are always vested interests. When we talk about Dalit patriarchy, that will usually be a woman from a Brahmin. If you see, in JNU, we used to have the GS cash.
Yeah.
And almost always, the people who were being brought in front of GS cash as culprits were usually Dalit women who were friendly with upper caste females. So talking about Dalit patriarchy, saying they are also patriarchal, they are also this, they are also that. Yes, they are. But you have to see where you are standing and saying they are patriarchal and what kind of experience of patriarchy. I have yet to hear of a Brahmin girl who committed suicide because a Dalit man jilted her. She was jilted by. Have you heard? Have you come up with think hard and see? Well, did any Brahmin girl commit suicide because a Dalit man, she was jilted by a Dalit man? No. But we have countless examples of Dalit girls having been jilted by Brahmin or dominant caste man, right? That's why I'm saying who is asking this question, who is framing that question, who is framing that juxtaposition, who is bringing that juxtaposition. Very, very important. Mostly, the Brahmin women I know who have been in relationships with this. I know this is personal knowledge. I'm not saying this. I'm not generalizing or universalizing. It's only my personal thing. I'm sure others might have something else. I don't know only about myself. The Brahmin girls I know, or the girls from an upper caste or dominant caste position or class position, I know who befriended Dalit men. Many of them married them. And got married, became a couple. Maybe they split, maybe they didn't, maybe they stayed together or not. Much of it ended in marriage. Later on, of course, we also have the phenomenon of fornications of girls of the parents. That's I'm not talking about that category, the ground level ones, but the more educated, urban middle class, university going crowd types. But a large number, most of the romantic relationships between dominant caste men and Dalit girls, did they end up in matrimony and did they become successful? If you look at it, then you'll get a lot of answers. You'll have to ask yourselves. You'll get a lot of answers. It'll be very revealing. And who are the boys they marry? I IAS officers, engineers, doctors. If you remember the Mandel Commission, we were all too young to remember the Mandel Commission protests. I see. So, can I imagine, women, university girls carrying placards? We won't get husbands. We won't get qualified husbands. Okay, having said that, now I'll come to the question of men's rights activism. See, I worked for long years in accessing legal rights for women. And I know the system is so skewed against women. The letter of the law seems to favor women. But the experience of it, how that law is implemented, how the women experience the letter of that law, you have to know, only then you realize how the system works against women. How patriarchal the police, the lawyers, the clerks in the court, the judges, how all of them conspire to suffocate the women, including women lawyers, some women lawyers. So patriarchy is not distributed along gender lines. It's an ideology. It's a power ideology, and it is not distributed among gender lines. Often it's distributed along caste lines. This has to be understood. If you understand that, then you got to the root of this men's rights business. So it's a reassertion of patriarchal power in reaction to the letter of the law, the kind of legislations that are being brought out in favor of women. Even though women don't enjoy the full benefits of those legislations. Like that is one. And then there's another much more painful thing which I must talk about. And that is how it is taken for granted by the entire system. Like I remember there used to be a series, Kannada series a long time ago, which every episode had a story in it. Or else there was it was I think a serial. But there was this young couple, and it was examining a troubled marriage. And then there's this woman who's pregnant. She does not have the child because she's on the cusp of some important project, promotion or something at her career. And her mother-in-law and her husband they want her to have the child. And so there's this debate going on, something like that. And then he says that the script makes the man say, you understand Kannada? ನಿನಗೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ಹಕ್ಕಿದೆಯೋ ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಹಕ್ಕು ನನಗೂ ಇದೆ ಆ ಮಗುವಿನ. The amount of right you have over the child, I also have the same right over that child. Not a bond. My counter to that is, what is your contribution to that child? A 3 kg baby is developed in a woman's body. It's a parasite on your body. Literally, 3 kilos of flesh and blood and bone is generated in the woman's body, out of her body, out of her system. What was the man's contribution? 1 microscopic speck. But the system says I have as much right as you have over the body. This is the logic of patriarchy. This is how it gives power to men and takes it away from men. Now, I'm not taking a position on choice approach as a pro-life approach. Here you will notice that I'm not making any such choice or distinction. I'm only talking about the assertion of the right of the man over the child. Even the unborn child. See? So then if you understand the logic behind that, then you will understand the logic behind men's rights. They got so much used to being in charge and to calling the shots, they cannot accept anything less than total surrender or abject surrender. Anything less than that is objectionable to them. That's it. It's a power dynamic. Having said that, I must also say that I have personally come across cases where the men and their family have suffered greatly due to the shabby implementation of the law. Like bunging elderly parents, sisters-in-law into jail for long. Very, very, very nasty stuff. Then, and a lot of the times it's not because the women are vindictive enough. Sometimes, yes, they are. Now, increasingly, I find that women are also turning extremely vindictive, which is sad, unfortunate. I don't support it, but I can understand where they're coming from because so much of nonsense is going on. This is also a backlash. However, and also, I mean, there are certain things automatically that it actually has to do also with the expectation of the woman being entirely responsible for the child. Okay, the man will assert saying, I have every right over what decision the making of the child. Does he have the same right over bathing the child, feeding the child, and putting the child to sleep? Does he bear the same responsibility there? How is it that only one portion where decision making is concerned, you will assert your rights? You assert your right over the need to be there for the child, care for the child, etc. Now I find increasingly, having seen roughly 2 generations of trainees, male trainees for gender, I would say that the younger generation are a lot more gender sensitive in certain ways in their personal relationships. Maybe not as in other ways as a class, because we do see a lot of blatant toxic masculinity also as a group when men get together. That is also there. That's also a reality. That is technology mostly driven, I guess, and market driven. But in human relationships, I find that boys are much more willing to accept that girls are also assertive, girls are also leaving their space. They don't expect complete subjugation and all that. That's not happening now as it used to be in the past. There has been a shift, no doubt about it. But overall, this expectation that all childcare responsibility is the mother's. Nurturance, entire thing is the mother's. Even the system also. So I know one case where the mother was very insane. She was not a motherly sort. She is not the sort who will come running, feed the child, put the child to sleep. She is not a very active, hands-on mother. The father is much more hands-on. The girl became 5 to 6 years old, 4 years old. The girl waits for the father to do everything for her. The mother is working always on the phone, always on the computer, stuff like that. Mother not very interested in cooking, not a conventional woman. The father is much more conventional and stuff like that. The court awards, they get into trouble, they get into a fight or whatever, they go to court. The court awards the custody to the mother because the child is small. And the father is going through agony and the child also is going through agony because she's more used to her father's nurturing. The mother just ran away with the child somewhere. It's not nice. It is quite fancy. A lot of stuff like that. I mean, I've seen things which are unfair to men. The system also has a minority of cases where men also have suffered very badly from ham-handed implementation of the law.
I think we are nearing the 2-hour mark now. So, there are this conversation will go on for a very, very long time. But are there more questions that any of you all have?
Or
that you would like to
responses,
ask, or just
thoughts.
thoughts? Yeah. Maybe we can take a round of those and then.
Well, when you're talking about different, I just wanted to bring, because you said you've gone across a lot of places and you were brought up in Maraa in a small town. Do you see a sort of somebody being brought up in a city and somebody being brought up in a rural area? And how do you see the difference in privileges that somebody who's brought up in a city gets?
I don't know, it depends on what you mean by privilege.
Mm.
Because
Mm.
a small town childhood has so many things, has so much of richness which a city child will never.
Yeah.
Like I was thinking to myself when I was growing up, I had the opportunity to run on wet grass, get up in the morning and smell the dew. You know, those are all sensory, and you know, that's some kind of an existential thing that unless you've gone through it at a very young age, you'll never get a connect with the earth. How long is it since we walked barefoot on soil? All of us will only go out will not go out without slippers. So even walking on bare earth or bare grass is I'd say for a city child that's a privilege. And when I was a little girl, I was sent to the market to buy stuff, 7 years, 8 years. You go on my own and come on my own. Can we allow it? Can the small child in a city have that experience or that exposure? It's highly risky. So like that, your personalities are built differently when you grow up with a lot of space and with a lot of organicity. The organic part of life, I think, is denied to children who grow up in cities. Like nowadays, I see many very privileged schools. They're enclosed in their glass enclosed cubes, and the assembly is held in an under a tall thing. Even the sky can't be seen. The assembly is there, but we didn't have that. We always used to be out in the playground playing and stuff like that. That's a huge privilege. I think children are denied that. So that's why it says, when you say privilege, what do you mean by privilege? And those are priceless things for the making of a human personality. Engaging with the real world, with the natural world in an organic manner, that's the biggest thing city-grown children are denied. And I would say that's a huge advantage that small town and village children get. The knowledge of how food is grown, how it's distributed, how it's prepared differently. Here it's all the same kind of market-driven food. The kind of food we eat in villages is real food, right? And that is a huge privilege which is denied to city-grown children. Here it's more, but I don't know. See, the world has changed so much, and with the ingress of technology, even urbanization has reached modernization, technology, infrastructure. All this is reaching the smaller towns, and so somewhere there's a homogenization and a loss of these kind of organic experiences as human beings. We really, as parents, we need to make choices. As individuals, we need to make choices. I definitely, even to this day, I so much my family knows, always dream of living in a place away from the city. Always, because I've always been close to the soil, have my pets around me. Pets should run around freely, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's a doable thing now. Now we can still do it. But I don't know whether in a few years we'll have that option. Otherwise, the rest of it, access to education, access to language, mobility, you can do that on the internet.
Anybody else has anything to share or say?
My daughter learned She's also like me, gifted with languages. She was able to pick up Persian, German, using Duolingo, and she studied French. So she just, because she's interested, she just puts Duolingo and keep using it. She picked up a lot. And so that you can do anywhere, as long as you have access to internet. I don't know, even bored.
It's like a deep thought, fake thought cloud.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like.
I think one thing that has the many thoughts, as she just said, I think one thing that I'm still kind of deliberating on is this idea that we're talking about self-representation leading to fragmentation versus solidarity might lead to standardization of experience within the movement. Then how does one then navigate between the both? Because there's also dominant within the movement, but there's also power play. So how does one negotiate this group or navigate this?
Yeah, the issue is that seeing that as a binary. The issue is seeing it as a binary. It's not a binary. Because if you are democratic, then you give space to everybody. But there's also a principle of the greatest good for the greatest number, the greatest common good. And so that's where we have to. So you have to have an ideology. You have to be rooted in democratic value system, constitutional and legal frameworks. If you're very sound on that, and your integrity is strong, then you won't easily compromise. Well, the downside of is that that age you're always on the outside looking in. But that's absolutely fine. Like me, you'll find me, and I find myself very comfortable in that position. I'm happy. I mean, okay, I may not have as much money or vehicles or jewelry or whatever, but I have something which is priceless, and that is a clear conscience and the firm knowledge that I haven't compromised my principles in any major way. Maybe for small things, I may have given in for some things like I told you. I refused to get involved in banking to save my job. But yeah, I might pay a little extra for a ticket or something. A railway ticket. I might compromise at that level. But no, on the merit really matters. I won't even think twice. So that you can't take away from me. That's me. And that's it. Take it or leave it. And when nobody is from me, I'll leave it, he get it.
It's probably a good note to conclude. I guess what I will do is just stop this because I don't think there's anybody online. Ram, I just have to press end stream.
Yeah.